This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 227. Is content marketing too expensive? Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you grow your tribe and your bottom line through insanely good content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is May 18th, 2017. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. First of all, a reminder to my Houston peeps, MarTech Houston is coming up next week. This is going to be a fantastic one-day conference focused on the latest marketing strategies for small and medium-sized businesses. I would love to see you there, and spaces are still available, but it's filling up fast. For more information, visit bit.ly/MarTech Houston. Now that is all caps, MarTechHouston, bit.ly/MarTech Houston, all caps. Okay, just a reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe. I also invite you to download our complimentary ebook, Top 10 Reasons Why Your Social Media Sucks. Download today to learn the top 10 mistakes that businesses make on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, social networks, and learn easy turnaround tips for each situation. To snag your free copy, go to contentmarketinggift.com. Last week, we revisited an old friend, print media, and looked at some signs that the tried and true printed word on paper just might be making a comeback. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or via the RSS feed. Today we're talking money, moolah, cash, dinero, and tackling the question of whether content marketing is just too expensive. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. A new update from Facebook kicking off today's news feed, pardon me. There is a new update to the Facebook algorithm. Now, this is related to their ongoing crackdown on fake news. This is the next level in that initiative. Facebook has implemented an update so that users will see fewer links and ads that link to pages that contain little substantive content or that feature, quoting here, disruptive, shocking, or malicious ads, unquote. Facebook is hoping that, again, to quote the blog post announcing this update, that, quote, this update will help reduce the economic incentives of financially motivated spammers, unquote. Now, as usually is the case with Facebook updates, we don't know what this is going to look like in practice. These are very general terms. They talk about little substantive content. Well, what does that look like? Or they talk about disruptive, shocking, or malicious ads. Well, what are those? What are they really cracking down on? So we have no idea what this is going to look like in practice, but as is usually my advice with regard to these updates, if you are creating quality content and sharing it on social media, you should have no problem. So I wouldn't lose too much sleep over this update from Facebook. Okay, big news out of Instagram. The latest salvo in the ongoing battle between Snapchat and Instagram stories could be a devastating blow to Snapchat. Instagram has launched its own version of facial lenses. Now, if you're not familiar with facial lenses, it's when you go to Snapchat and you use your selfie cam, and then you can impose some lenses on, like there's a puppy dog face. There's one where you throw up rainbows. There are different faces that you can put on yourself. And for many Snapchat users, that has been the one thing that's kept them loyal to Snapchat. They love those facial lenses, and since Instagram Stories launched last summer, this has been one feature that has kept a lot of users from defecting. Well, now Instagram Stories has a lens feature of its own, including a few that are remarkably similar to Snapchat's. I went over there myself the other day to check out these lenses, and yes, they have the puppy dog face. They have a bunny rabbit face, but they also have some new stuff. They have hipster glasses that you can impose on faces. So they have some interesting ideas. If you want to take the new feature for a spin, go to your Instagram Stories camera screen, and there's a little face icon that you can tap to bring up these filters. So what does this mean for the ongoing battle between these two giants of evanescent content? I think it's significant because I've talked to several Snapchat users who were really only sticking around for the lenses. That was the one thing that kept them on Snapchat that they could not get at Instagram. Now, of course, a couple of weeks ago, Snapchat upped its own game with world lenses that took the lens concept, and instead of applying lenses to the face, they used it on the forward-facing or the rear-facing camera and applied it to your environment, so you could actually place virtual objects in your environment. So we will have to see how this shakes out. I was presenting on this on Snapchat and Instagram at an AMA event a few weeks ago, and I was talking about how back in the day, Facebook tried to buy Snapchat, and Snapchat turned them down. So yeah, this is what happens when you shun Zuckerberg. He's like, that's fine. I'll just go create a clone and put you out of business. That's what he did with MySpace, and that's his modus operandi. So my money's on Instagram, which is, of course, owned by Facebook, but we will have to see what happens next. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called 7 Easy Tactics for Generating Content Marketing Ideas. This is by Disha Dinesh on the Marketing Profs blog. And it's funny, when I work with a new client, one of the questions that they say is, well, how are you going to keep coming up with ideas for content? And I always reassure them, oh, you'll be surprised how many topics we'll be able to come up with. And we have, we'll just work our magic and come up with some great topics for you. But behind the scenes, yeah, sometimes we get stumped and we are just at a loss for what to come up with for this content. And we always work it out, which is why I was so happy to come across this post. Disha gives us 7 simple, practical tasks or tactics rather, for cranking out new ideas for your content. Very simple, very useful, and a couple of tricks that I did not have on my own radar, so I was able to learn something too. It's an excellent read, good to have in your back pocket for those days when you are staring at the blank screen, and I will, of course, link to it in the blog post for this episode over at resonancecontent.com/podcast. That's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at @RachParker so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. Is content marketing too expensive? You ever go through a period of like a couple of weeks or a couple of months where the same topic keeps circling back in different conversations you have and different resources you come across and different people you talk to? I've had that experience, and one issue that has kept coming back over the last few weeks is money. Money, 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 money. Little interlude to kick us off here, but it's come up in interesting ways over the last couple of weeks. So I took this as a sign that it's time to talk about money and budgets. So one thing that came across my radar, or one episode that got me thinking about this, was an interaction I had with a prospective client a few weeks ago. And this was a client who passed on my services for a very interesting reason. And I will get into that here in a few minutes, actually turn that into a blog post. And then last week at a speaking gig, one of the attendees grabbed me after the presentation and he said, "Thank you for the presentation, very informative." And he asked me point blank, how much does it cost to do content marketing? I mean, how ballpark, what are we talking here? And he was quite insistent on getting an idea of what all this is going to cost. He was very nice about it. Wasn't pushy or aggressive or anything. He was just very insistent. So these two episodes really struck me. And I again, this is my God's way of telling me it's time to tackle this huge issue of how much is this going to cost here on the podcast. So first, let me tell you about this interaction with a prospective client. This client had contacted me and she'd said, we're working with a blog service right now. We're not happy with the content. It's not engaging. People aren't responding to it. We feel it could be much better. So we'd like to discuss your services. So no problem. I put together a proposal. We went through it on an online meeting, and I walked them through what they've got going on, what my recommendations were, and yes, what the investment was attached to that. And I got an email from her a couple of weeks later that said, after reviewing your proposal, we've decided to stay with our current provider. They're only charging us $25 per blog post, and we feel we are getting excellent value for the money. Close quote. That is a direct quote from her email. Now, I had looked very closely at the content that they're getting from this provider. And, if your criteria are everything spelled correctly and no egregious grammar mistakes, then yeah, this fit the bill. But everything else about it was absolutely horrendous. The title was not compelling. The ideas were not presented in a logical manner. There was no sense of personality behind the post. It was about 350 words long, and after word 125, I was starting to tune out because it was just so badly put together. It was riddled with cliches, and the ideas just weren't compelling. So this is what they were getting for $25 a post, which, I think they were overcharged, quite frankly, but, that's just me. But anyway, I was just flabbergasted at this email I got from her saying that, before our conversation started, it was, we're not happy, we're not getting results, we're not getting engagement. And then after they see what good content costs, then they change their tune and say, we feel like we're getting excellent value for the money. So that was the first episode that got me thinking along these lines. But I really want to talk about this question that I got from this person after this speaking gig. As I said, he was quite insistent on getting a figure, asking me how much is it going to cost and getting a figure. Now, usually when people ask me this question, my response is, if I give you a figure, if I tell you it's going to cost you this to do content marketing, this is not a proposal. This is people just walking up to me and asking me. I usually respond saying, if I give you a figure, what are you going to do with it? And the usual response is, well, I'll take it to my boss. Okay. What is she going to do with it? Well, she will tell me if I can have the money or not. And what if she says no? Well, I guess we're not going to do it. Okay, you see what happens when you start from a cost standpoint? So there are a couple of problems with this gentleman's question. Again, I really appreciate him coming up to me and asking me this. And I refused to answer. I said, there is no way I can give you a number because it's like saying, how much does it cost me to run a business? Well, it depends on the business, depends on the goals, depends on the product and the target. I mean, it depends on so many things. But the first thing that is wrong with this gentleman's question is that you are starting from a perspective of content as a cost. You're skipping right over the benefit and what it's going to do for your brand, and you're jumping right ahead to the cost. It's almost like they're saying, we know we're going to be throwing money out the window. We just want to know how much. How much is this going to hurt? And I was thinking about this. So picture a man and a woman on a first date. Maybe they met online and they're having their first date at Starbucks, let's say. And it goes well. They find they have some things in common. They share a few laughs. They're getting along very well. And then all of a sudden, the man leans across the table and says, look, this is going well, and I think we would be good together. I got to know, how much is it going to cost me to be in this relationship? Okay. How often am I going to have to take you out to dinner? And when I do, is it going to be Arby's or is it going to be a steakhouse? How often do I have to send you flowers? And when I do, are the Kroger flowers going to be enough for you? Or do you want like FTD delivering to your office? How much is it going to cost? What are your expectations for birthday gifts? Okay. And, $100, $500. What is it going to cost me to be in a relationship with you? Again, ballpark. I'm just being practical. I'm trying to figure out what I'm in for here. So after our friend got done squealing in pain over the hot cup of coffee that was just dumped in his lap, it might dawn on him that talking about cost is probably not a great way to start a relationship. It's probably going, even if the female had not dumped coffee in his lap and stormed out of his life, just not a good foot to start off on. And from our perspective as content marketers, we don't do content marketing to spend money. We do it to build relationships with current and prospective customers. And when we start from a perspective of, well, how much is this going to cost me? It's almost like our friend at the coffee shop. It just starts off on a bad note. And I find when I work with customers, when they start off from that cost standpoint, they don't keep it up. They drop out after a while. They're the ROI groupies, always chasing that ROI. And when they don't see that within 6 months, they say, well, this doesn't work. We're going to go back to our banner ads and our outrageously expensive print ads. And because those work. This isn't working. Those work. So that's the first problem. When you start off looking at content as a cost, then you're almost setting yourself up for failure. The second problem with the question is what the real question is. When someone says, how much is it going to cost to do content marketing? What they're really saying, or what many of them are really saying, is what's the absolute cheapest we can do this? What's the absolute minimum of what's the least we can spend in order to get our little participation trophy and say, yes, we are content marketers. We are on the leading edge. We are following the guru's advice. We deserve the benefits of a strong content marketing program. And again, not a great place to start from. What's the absolute cheapest? It'd be like our friend at Starbucks saying, okay, what's the cheapest? What's the least I can spend to date you? What's the bottom? What's the floor here? Now, I am not one of those unicorns or one of those purveyors of fairy tales who will try to tell you that money should be no object. Of course, money's an object. Budgets are a reality. Funds are not limited. And yes, budgets need to be allocated wisely. I'm just saying when you start with that cost question, you could end up with something that just doesn't make sense for your organization or for your audience. And when it doesn't make sense, it's not going to give you results. So what do we do instead? We can't ignore this issue of cost, but starting off with it as question number one is setting us up for failure. So how do we get there? Well, what we need to do is start with the objective. What do you want to achieve in your content marketing? What do we want content marketing to do for us? And I was thinking about athletes. We just had the Olympics in Rio last year, which was wonderful. But think about an athlete who is doing great, winning competitions and thinking, okay, I want to be in the Olympics. Well, she doesn't start off with a spreadsheet talking about and figuring out what it's going to cost her. She starts off with her goals. When do I want to compete in the Olympics? How many events, which events, and then she works back from there. So we need to do the same thing. We need to start with the objective. And with content marketing, I think we need both a mission and a set of measurable goals. The mission is more general. The mission is something like, we want to be the number one thought leader on X issue in Y industry. Now, that is valuable to have. It is wonderful. It is important, but it's not a goal. The difference between missions and goals is that goals have to be SMART. You may have heard this acronym before. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-focused. So when we think about goals that are going to support this mission, we need to think in terms of blog traffic, list size, social followership, mentions from influencers, etc., etc. So we need to look at where we want to go. And those goals can have 1-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals, whatever makes sense. But The important thing is we have those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-focused goals that we are going to want to achieve. From there, once we have the mission and the goal set out, we need to sketch out how we're going to get there. So how are we going to achieve this blog traffic? How are we going to get our list to this level? How are we going to get our social followership to this level? So this is where you get into specifics like how often are you going to post on your blog? What kinds of videos are you going to produce? Which social networks are you going to focus on? Then and only then can you advance to the budgetary phase. Then and only then can we put together a cost estimate. So that's where, yes, we figure out how we're going to use internal and external resources, which tools we're going to need, how much those tools are going to cost, what we're going to need to spend on promotion, things like promoted posts and maybe some pay-per-click advertising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So cost comes after the goals and the tactics. So here's a question that a lot of people ask me. Let's say you go through your goals, you go through your tactics, you get your cost estimate, and it's just way more than your budget can handle. And you go to your boss, you ask for more money, but it's not forthcoming. What do you do? And we'll talk about what not to do in a second. But what you do, you adjust your goals. You go back to the first step and you say, okay, our goal was to be a Lamborghini, but maybe we can aim to be a Mercedes or an Audi or a good solid Honda, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with backing up your goals to be more in line with the tactics that are going to align with the funds you have available. Now, what not to do is what too many people do is they say, well, we've got these goals, we've got these tactics. How can we do what we want to do, but do it on the cheap? So how can we execute these tactics as cheaply as possible? Bad idea. Bad idea. If you start your content marketing journey cutting corners, you're just not going to achieve those goals you set for yourself. If your goal is to generate a certain level of blog traffic and you determine you need to blog once a week and you start looking for $25 blog posts, you're just not going to get there. And I love an expression that my friend Ariana taught me. She's from Croatia. And she said that we have an expression there. You're not rich enough to buy cheap. And that is true with so many things, especially when it comes to content marketing, especially when it comes to content marketing. Not only will putting out cut rate content, not only will it not help you achieve your goals, but it can actually damage your brand. As I say in this blog post that I wrote about this prospective client with a $25 blog post, when people go to your blog and they see crap content, you're telling them one or two things. You're implying either A, we know you came here for quality content and we don't know how to give it to you, which, if that's the impression you get, why would they trust your brand with anything else? Or number two, you might be telling them, we know you came here from quality content and we don't give a shit. We just want to get our participation trophy and be able to call ourselves content marketers and to sit back and expect the benefits. And I love something that Joe Polizzi said last year at Content Marketing World. He said, and I quote, "Mediocre content will hurt your brand more than doing nothing at all." Close quote. I'm going to have that tattooed on my forehead the next time I speak to anybody about content marketing, because it's true. If you put out crap content, that's like having office space where people walk in and the linoleum's peeling up and there are dead plants in the corner and 3 of the 4 light fixtures are out. It's just bad. It's bad for your brand. So I can see where he's coming from when he says this mediocre content will hurt you more than just doing nothing. And if you think about it from that standpoint, that $25 that you spent on that cheap blog post is being wasted. In fact, it's not only not doing you any good, it's actually hurting you. So if after doing all our due diligence and coming up with the estimate of the investment requires, if we find ourselves coming up short, we need to go back and reassess those goals. Again, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what we don't need to do is try to go cheap, because It's far better to go after a more modest goal and do it well than to try to, I don't know, shoot for the stars in a ship made out of Tinker Toys, which is what many brands are trying to do. So that is my very opinionated take on the question, is content marketing too expensive? If you have any questions, or if you want to add to the conversation, or if you've been able to overcome this issue, maybe with your boss or with someone in the C-suite, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to tweet me at @RachelParker or contact me through the website resonancecontent.com. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. To outsource or not to outsource? That is the question. When you first make the decision to add content marketing to your marketing strategy, or to put together a proposal for your boss so that you can get some budget to add content marketing to your marketing slate, there's always the question of whether to do everything internally or to outsource. It's like I have a client in the software field, and the question of build or buy is something that comes up a lot. Companies figure, okay, we need this application. Do we build it ourselves, or do we buy it from an external provider? And so many people, when they call me about Resonance's services, one of the first questions they ask is, how does this even work? So that's why I put a whole section in my book, The Content Marketing Coach, about outsourcing. How it works, how to decide whether it's right for you, and if it is right for you, how to choose a partner and how to manage that relationship. If you want to learn more about that, go to contentmarketingcoachbook.com. But really, every team is different, every organization is different, and you will have to determine what is best for you and your team. That being said, keep in mind 3 things when you think about outsourcing. Number 1, it's not necessarily cheaper to do everything in-house. Think about it. You might have a blogging campaign, and what takes someone on your team for whom writing might not be their strong point, it might take them 5 or 6 hours to put together a blog post. Compare that to what an agency might be able to do, who does this all the time. They might be able to put together the same post in 2 hours. And think about what you're paying that internal employee to work for 5 hours versus what you would pay an agency to work for 2 hours. So really think about the skill sets on your team. Think about the bandwidth on your team. If your team is absolutely swamped, it might not be the best choice to keep everything in-house. So keep in mind that it's not necessarily cheaper. Number 2, it's not necessarily better to do everything in-house. In other words, you're not automatically going to wind up with higher quality content if you do it solely with your internal team. Keep in mind that content marketing agencies like Resonance do content all day, every day, and they know what makes for a good topic. They know what makes for a click-worthy title. They know how to position and how to formulate your content so that it's engaging, so that it keeps people interested from beginning to end, so that it attracts better search traffic. And when people find it, they want to stick around and read it all the way through. And maybe those skill sets exist within your team and maybe they don't. So it's not necessarily, you won't necessarily wind up with superior quality content if you do it all in-house. The third thing I want you to keep in mind is that outsourcing doesn't have to be an all or nothing arrangement. It doesn't have to be a case of we're either going to give all our content marketing to this agency or keep it all in-house. Many of my current clients have full-time content teams or full-time content creators on staff. What's happened is these folks have more on their plates than they can keep up with, but they don't have quite enough to justify going out and hiring another person. So outsourcing can be a perfect solution for filling those gaps. So when deciding how to set up your content marketing machine, remember that outsourcing offers a number of advantages. It's not a perfect solution for everybody, so consider what you need, consider what is right for you, for your organization. The key is choosing the right partner and knowing how to work with them so that you set them and yourself up for success. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. Also, if you want to learn more about content marketing, you will definitely want to grab a copy of my book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win. It's available in book and Kindle format on Amazon. To learn more about the book and to download a free chapter, visit contentmarketingcoachbook.com. Also, we are in graduation season, and if you know someone who is graduating with a degree in marketing, this is a great gift for them. Recent grads love this book because it is real-world advice that they just didn't get as part of their education. So if you have a grad in your family or in your life, then think about picking up a copy for them. As you know, I always like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from American poet Emily Dickinson. She once said, quote, "Whenever a thing is done for the first time, it releases a little demon," unquote. So the question for you, my friend, is which little demons are you going to release this week? Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.